The movie opens with a young couple, Tun and Jane, driving home late at night after attending a wedding. The scene is quiet, with only the sound of their conversation and the dark road ahead. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a young woman appears on the road. Jane, startled, swerves, and they crash into her. In shock and panic, they pull over, but when they check the road, the woman is nowhere to be found. Tun insists that they drive away, leaving the scene, believing it would be too complicated to report the accident. Jane is visibly shaken but reluctantly agrees. As they return to their normal lives, Jane is haunted by guilt over the incident, while Tun tries to move on. However, strange and unsettling things begin to happen. In Tun's photographs, eerie shadows and ghostly figures start to appear, hinting at a supernatural presence lingering around them. Both try to return to their normal routines. Tun, a photographer, develops a set of photos from a recent shoot. While reviewing the images, he notices strange light flares and blurry figures that look disturbingly like faces in the background. Unsettled, he brushes it off as a photographic error. Meanwhile, Jane continues to struggle with guilt. She is plagued by vivid nightmares of the woman they hit. In one dream, the woman stares at her with dead, accusing eyes. Jane wakes up in a panic, feeling increasingly disturbed by the accident. As Tun develops more photographs, the strange images intensify. Faces, shadows, and ghostly figures begin to appear consistently in his work. One photo shows a clear image of the woman they hit standing behind him, her face distorted and ghostly. This leaves Tun and Jane both terrified, and they realize something supernatural is following them. Disturbed by the ghostly images in Tun's photographs, Jane begins researching paranormal phenomena. She learns about spirit photography where ghosts and supernatural entities manifest in photos. Jane believes the woman they hit is haunting them through these images. Determined to understand what's happening, Jane confronts Tun, but he remains skeptical and dismissive. However, after reviewing the eerie photos again, Tun can't deny the haunting presence. The couple decides to visit a photography expert who confirms that the images are not editing errors but likely supernatural occurrences. At this point, Jane is convinced the woman is the same person they hit on the road, but Tun continues to avoid discussing the incident. As they leave the expert's office, Jane presses Tun to report the accident to the police, but Tun becomes defensive, refusing to take responsibility. The tension between them grows, with Jane insisting they face what happened, while Tun becomes increasingly secretive and withdrawn. Meanwhile, the ghostly manifestations intensify, and it becomes clear that the woman is not just in their photos but is now haunting their lives. The supernatural occurrences intensify, leaving both Tun and Jane on edge. Tun begins experiencing physical symptoms. He feels an overwhelming heaviness on his shoulders and neck, often waking up with severe pain. One night, while working late in his darkroom, Tun sees a shadowy figure behind him in the reflection of the glass. He quickly turns around, but no one is there. Jane, on the other hand, has more vivid encounters. One evening, while she's alone at home, she hears strange noises and senses someone watching her. She walks through the apartment, turning on lights, but no one is there. As she enters the bedroom, she is horrified to see the ghostly figure of the woman from the accident standing in the corner, her face pale and emotionless. Jane screams and bolts out of the room. Frightened and desperate, Jane tells Tun about the apparition, but he remains evasive, unwilling to discuss the accident. The strain between them grows as Jane's fear intensifies, and Tun becomes more isolated, clearly hiding something. The couple's lives spiral deeper into fear, with the ghost becoming more aggressive, her presence felt everywhere, in their home, in Tun's photographs, and even in their minds. Jane becomes more determined to uncover the identity of the woman haunting them. She visits Tun's old university to investigate further. After some inquiries, Jane stumbles upon information about a former student named Nader, a shy, reclusive girl who had a troubled relationship with Tun. Jane learns that Nader was often bullied and ostracized, with rumors suggesting she had an unhealthy obsession with Tun. Disturbed by this revelation, Jane confronts Tun, demanding answers. Reluctantly, Tun admits that he knew Nader but downplays their relationship, claiming she was unstable and that he had distanced himself from her. Jane senses there's more to the story, but Tun remains defensive and closed off. Meanwhile, the ghostly hauntings continue, becoming more terrifying. Jane sees visions of Nader wherever she goes, in mirrors, reflections, and even standing at the foot of her bed at night. These encounters grow more intense, as if Nader is trying to communicate something to her. Jane realizes that Nader's vengeful spirit is tied to unresolved pain and that Tun may be hiding a darker secret. The couple's relationship frays under the pressure, with Jane feeling increasingly isolated and fearful of both Nader's ghost and Tun's evasiveness. The haunting intensifies as Jane grows more suspicious of Tun. Unable to bear the tension any longer, she confronts him once again, demanding the truth about Nader. This time, Tun finally breaks down and confesses the dark secret he's been hiding. Tun reveals that Nader had been in love with him during their time at university, but he never felt the same way. When she became too attached, Tun and his friends cruelly humiliated her, leading to her emotional breakdown. Tun admits that after the incident, Nader disappeared, and he never saw her again, until now, in ghostly form. Horrified by Tun's confession, Jane realizes that Nader's spirit is seeking revenge not just for the accident but for the deep betrayal she suffered at Tun's hands. Jane is overwhelmed with guilt and fear, knowing that they're being haunted because of Tun's past cruelty. She's no longer a passive spirit but an active force seeking vengeance. The revelation of Tun's past actions leaves both him and Jane in a state of terror. The supernatural events escalate, with Nader's spirit becoming increasingly violent and menacing. Jane insists they seek help, but Tun, paralyzed by fear and guilt, believes it's too late to escape Nader's wrath. One night, while alone in their apartment, the haunting reaches its peak. Jane watches in horror as Nader's ghost appears, more corporeal than ever, her eyes filled with rage. Nader's spirit attacks Tun, pinning him down with the same crushing weight he had felt on his shoulders throughout the film. As Jane watches helplessly, Tun screams in agony, unable to move under the immense pressure. In a final desperate attempt, Jane tries to pull Tun free, but Nader's force is too strong. After the terrifying encounter with Nader's spirit, Tun's mental state begins to unravel. He becomes increasingly paranoid and unstable, constantly feeling Nader's presence around him. His physical symptoms worsen, with the persistent pain in his neck and shoulders growing unbearable. As Tun becomes more consumed by guilt, he starts seeing Nader in every reflection, in mirrors, windows, and even photographs that don't exist. The weight on his shoulders, both literal and emotional, intensifies, pushing him to the brink of madness. Meanwhile, Jane desperately tries to find a solution, but her research into the paranormal reveals that once a vengeful spirit has attached itself to someone, it's almost impossible to break free. Jane watches helplessly as Tun spirals further into madness, constantly haunted by his past actions. One night, in a fit of desperation, Tun tries to destroy all of his photographs, believing that eliminating them will somehow rid him of Nader's presence. But the more he destroys, the more Nader appears, in new photos, in the shadows, always watching. Tun begins taking photos, trying to capture Nader's ghost, hoping for some kind of resolution. Suddenly, the camera flashes, and Nader's figure appears. His camera catches a glimpse of Nader's spirit sitting on his shoulders. The weight he's been feeling all along was her. This shocking revelation sends Tun into a panic, realizing that Nader's spirit has been literally and figuratively clinging to him since her death. Tun is broken and physically deteriorating from the overwhelming weight on his shoulders, is confined to a hospital. His body is frail, and he can barely move due to the constant, crushing pressure he has felt for weeks. As he sits in his wheelchair, staring blankly into space, Jane visits him one last time. Nader's ghost has been sitting on Tun's shoulders in every image, her spirit latched onto him, the source of his constant neck pain and the heaviness he couldn't escape. The final, devastating twist is that Nader's spirit has not just been haunting Tun through visions and photographs, she has physically attached herself to him, becoming a permanent, inescapable part of his life. The weight he's been feeling was Nader's ghost all along, clinging to him as a manifestation of his guilt and betrayal. The movie ends with a haunting image of Tun sitting in his wheelchair, his head drooped forward under the invisible burden of Nader's ghost. The eerie silence and Tun's vacant expression leave the audience with a lingering sense of dread, knowing that Nader's revenge is complete, and Tun is doomed to carry her weight forever. Shudder leaves us with one of the most chilling twists in horror cinema. It's not just a ghost story, it's a haunting tale about guilt, betrayal, and the consequences of past actions. The film masterfully builds suspense, only to deliver a gut-wrenching twist that stays with you long after it ends. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more movie recaps.